All right, next one is a big one for split opinions on TNM, because Imperial Triumphant is our next record. It's called Spirit of Ecstasy. It is the follow-up to 2020's Alphaville, which I must say is the most already I've been about an album in recent memory, and it's not the only one of those in this episode, believe it or not. But even they tend to work on a 2-year schedule anyway. Like, it was the same between Vile Luxury and Alphaville, but I guess time's been so fucked. But also on top of the fact that I never stopped spinning Alphaville, really. Like, I bought the vinyl like a few weeks ago. Like, I can call Alphaville the new Imperial Triumphant record, and it still makes sense to me, but it's not anymore. But to make a record of that fucking magnitude, that was that dense and demanded that much of his listener, to truly say, I have a handle on this record, and then just rock up with another one is so crazy to me. Alphaville is one of the definitive extreme, or even just progressive, heavy records of the last few years. They've been around for a fair old while, but Vile Luxury in 2018, I guess, was their kind of, we've really found our sound breakthrough. And then Alphaville was that sound graduating to one of the best, most fully formed and peerless things in the world right now. Sam, you can't fucking stand them.
I hated Alphaville. Like, do you know what I'm going to say? This band needs to stop releasing albums in the summer in the middle of a bloody heat wave. Because I remember Alphaville came out when it was that heat wave in 2020, and I just remember like trying to wrap my head around and just melting, and I was like, and I'm like, when I was doing this and we're in the middle of heat wave again, I was like, it's just happened again.
I remember was it when they did the stream supporting Behemoth's stream, and you watching it and being like, what the fuck is this?
Like, the thing is like, I will straight up be like, the level of musicianship in this band is ridiculous. Like, I'm not gonna pretend that this is like they're rubbish, but I just could not wrap my head around Alphaville. I genuinely tried with that album, like, and I can see why people love it, but it is one of those albums where I'm just like, I'm open to extremity, and I admire Imperial Triumphant for finding a new level of extremity, but it just like is a headache.
And I think it's fair, because this, by its very nature, is not music for everybody.
It's not music for anybody.
Well,
it is.
It's why it's kind of remarkable that Alphaville turned as many heads and converted as many people as it did, because it shouldn't. It's too extreme. It's too out there. It's too
jazz fusion, black metal,
uncomfortable and ear destroying. But it did. And that's why we're talking about Spirit of Ecstasy with some level of gravitas, and they're fucking, again, the stream that we watched, the setup was so cool. It was like a jazz club in NYC. The presentation of it, obviously their look and everything, which is the one most striking around, but the guest musicians and stuff playing fucking trumpet or whatever it was a real an evening, one night with Imperial Triumphant thing. I think they released it as a live album, and the cover was like the guys in their masks looking like an old jazz record holding their instruments or something. It was fucking amazing. But God, this band are outstanding, and Alphaville is fucking outstanding in particular. Like I'm still so in on it. I had the vinyl on recently. It's one of the most fully realized worlds to get lost in of late. And that world is one of avant-garde extreme metal being lost to the 1920s streets of jazz club New York, and that sense of architecture, the kind of retro-futurist design, the actual kind of sense of geography within the record itself, and then that gets fucking burst with these insanely crushing and terrifying discordant releases. There are many, many bands out there who are fucking extreme and are fucking heavy and are nightmarish. I genuinely think the reason that Alphaville stood out so much is because there is a craft and a dedication to forming this, cohesive kind of body of work in that is so far beyond. And that's what really marks it out. Spirit of Ecstasy, I think, is not quite that. God, are you thrust into a world of madness?
Like, it doesn't even give you any time. Like, the moment chump change begins, you're straight in there with just, like, this weird, out-of-tune, like, jazz riff with these, like, grunting, growled vocals. And it's just kind of like, you've got nothing to grasp onto, and it just gets heavier and thicker, and you get these clanging sounds and unsettling noises in the background, and it's just kind of like it is trying to be unpleasant to you, and like it sounds like, say, like the middle part of this track, it sounds like it's just been pulled apart, and all you're just left with is just this like piercing, screaming noise by the end of it. Like,
I think this record might be even weirder than Alphaville, which is so admirable, perhaps not quite as cohesive, but it has the feel of these guys. You know, they've established what they do on Vile Luxury. They mastered it on Alphaville. Now, again, just a couple years later, going, all right, what the fuck can we turn this to now? And turning to all these possibilities, which means, again, if you couldn't get on with Alphaville, which is so cohesive, God bless you having to review this one. The way Death on a Highway starts, like, I can't tell if it's like a prog rock keyboard solo or literally just the bass guitar getting all fucked up. Like, it's so disorientating.
Like, Death on a Highway was the moment because the thing is I like, I'm not gonna say I liked the first half of this record, but I could kind of get what they're doing, and then Death on a Highway kind of starts, and the album just kind of goes, oh my, this is when it becomes just a nightmare for me.
It's freaky as hell. And again, when that song, you know, it starts so mental, and then it kind of turns into a death metal song. But we've done quite a lot of early death metal recently, like between the Death Special we did, where we were literally tracking the birth of the genre, and then, you know, Slowly We Rot the other week, like, to the point that we should probably lay off it for a little while and do something else. But, like, talking about, again, the roots of that genre here, to this point, you know, it's like, you know, this puts to bed any argument that you can't do anything more with, you know, extreme metal or whatever, because, like, the tools of death metal there have become something so on another plane to what you'd think of as death metal. Like, it's got the brutal riffs, the blast, the growled vocals, but it feels like no death metal I've ever heard. And I guess the selling point to somebody who's never heard them is it's like modern death metal's answer to Mr. Bungle at their nuttiest. Like, I think they're still working with Trace Bruance in some capacity, who produced their last record, but it's avant-garde, free-flowing jazz, and goddamn nightmare extremity, where it feels like this record, you know, they've, again, got this one out quickly, improvising together, probably, you know, out on a creative limb somewhere between fucking jazz gigs and hired jobs, where, you know, part of Imperial Triumphant's kind of thing is that they are, like, all professional full-time musicians, in the sense that they play in, like, wedding bands and shit like that. And
like they seem like really accomplished session musicians who you could recruit for anything, really. Like,
yeah, and it's, you know, it's honing their chops in these, like, you know, professional, extremely disciplined environments, and then it gets poured out in these, like, creatively liberated outbursts on their records. Like, Metro Vertigo, it's funny that you said you were almost okay with the first half of this record, because Metro Vertigo, which is track 2, is fucking rough, right?
Yeah,
like,
no,
even though
like,
I did listen to this album about 3 or 4 times in a row last night, just going with it, but, like, that feels like a concentration of all of their nastiest tricks. Like, it's so heavy.
Yeah, like, I mean, Metro Vertigo, I will say, the drummer in this band is insane. Like the sort of, the amount he's, like, hitting every part of the kit, the sort of the polyrhythms, like, the amount of stuff going on, I'm like, I can really admire that. Like, that they are taking peerless musicianship and turning it into the sound of a nightmare. Like,
did you find anything to appreciate about, I guess, the kind of the atmosphere and the feeling of the record? Because that is ultimately the biggest selling point for someone who's going to go with it.
Like, it is, like I say, like, it is deliberately trying to be unpleasant. Like, it is not trying to be easy listening. And I think, like, I don't think it has quite, like, I do agree, as much as I kind of, like, scoff and laugh, I do agree with you in that the last time did have a world that it existed in that you really felt part of. I think this is, like, trying to that, it never felt quite as, like, clear to me. You've got, like, there's bits where you have, like, you know, these radio messages coming through and all that kind of stuff, like, but it is definitely, like, if you want to be transported into like a genuinely frightening place, this album does do that.
I think it is trying to do something a little different to Alphaville, but the atmosphere of these records in general, and part of why I think this band are brilliant, is it's so fucking evil, and so
it really is,
and so surrealistic as well. And I think that surrealism felt more like what this one is going with. Like, you know, we spoke about the first single has this, like, fucking Lost Highway music video where they're playing in front of like a Rolls Royce or something, like in the middle of the desert in their, Mars and shit. And that they are psychedelic, plummets of like the worst and freakiest kind. Like they tap into a freakiness that only Aranti Pazuzu, I think, right now, while having actual music this good, can equal. But at the same time, it's really, I think it's very pristine. It's very well produced. You can take in every single thing. When he just fucking mid-range bellows, like on his own in the middle of Metro Vertigo, like in one motion, his entire lower half has given way, and you are hearing his guts fall out of the bottom end of him. Like, it's a fucking horror show. I love that. I'm not even sure if it's Zachary because it sounds so different to the rest of the vocals, but there's these screams that come in that just feel like someone about to murder you.
Yeah,
not kind of a metal scream, not a perfectly trained voice as instrument thing. Just the sound of someone inflicting pain on you.
Yeah, like there's a few things that way. You just have these like just deranged, like panicked screams coming in, and again, like I'm like, cool. I get that way they're doing that. We're like it being part of this like just twisted labyrinthian nightmare you're part of. But yeah, I don't know. I can see the merits of this band, but I just don't want to listen to it.
I think there are many people out there who will agree, but I think it's tapping into a nightmare subconscious that, naturally many people don't want to visit it, but they're in a field of one in metal, and it's a hard stage to get to. Like, even, there's these cavernous kind of portal death metal riffs that they base a lot of it on. You add in this fucking jazz roll, like chump change at the start. That the dissonance thing is kind of well worn and well established, but what the drums and the bass are doing with that is crazy, and it adds, it gives it this fucking rolling, galloping, queasy thing that nothing else can touch. They do the same thing when they go for more of a black metal blast type sound, where on Mercurius Gilded even, the bizarreness of like the guitar fretting while it's being kind of tremolo picked like that, and then that fuses in with these kind of like almost like old silent cinema or whatever, kind of like horror strings that are like pounding
I
the
was
same
wondering
direction.
about that, like where you've got this like quite traditional, like straightforward black metal touches, like the tremolo riffing and the blast beats, but you've got these like weird like I don't know, is it a synth or is it like stabbing underneath it?
I think it might be samples of like orchestra, and like I love it, and it's part of their identity because it's got this kind of old early 20th century cinema soundtrack type thing, but it's being beamed into the future with how full on and unrelenting it is. That song as well, it has a death metal riff in it that's one of the most like traditional recognizable death metal riffs in their canon. It's just like a big Morbid Angel riff slapped in the middle, and like we were saying kind of earlier about breakdowns and shit, in the surroundings there it goes off so hard. And that same song got fucking Kenny G on it
doing a sax solo. Like, to be fair, that is probably my favorite song on this record. I like so again, like, it's the one song where it all kind of makes sense to me almost, where I can kind of be like, I get what you're doing. Again, I don't want to listen to it much, but it all kind of comes together, and I'm like, I get what they're going for. And
Kenny
one,
G, not surprised he's here really, because he's a kind of instrumental maverick who seems to be on the same page of like, respecting musicianship over anything else. But it's so fucking just like, oh my god, there he is. And you've got, you mentioned the drummer, the bassist, that free form, like fucking wilding all over the fretboard, untamable. It feels like nothing else in metal, let alone death metal. Like, even compared to when bands were bringing jazz style bass playing into death metal, like way back in the early 90s, had nothing on like how far this guy goes. Like, even just the different even just the different bass tones and stuff, that are really freakish kind of like wah parts that gurgle out of the mix at various points. You've got the lead guitars, which it feels like it's again even more so again on this record, taking in this kind of psychedelic kind of sense to its note choices and stuff. There's a kind of really Alan Holdsworth style kind of jazz fusion part in The Pleasure of Their Company. It's in the same lineage as when we talk about Meshuggah and stuff like that, and kind of where drawing that alien bizarro jazz fusion style shared kinships. But that song in The Pleasure of Their Company, pure, like it's a fucking, it's more jazz fusion than it is metal, really. Like, it's just organs and trumpets losing their fucking minds, swinging drums, but it's from like a nightmare reality where the weight and the evil of metal has permeated everything. It is madness.
Yeah, like in The Pleasure of Their Company is the point where I'm just like, And by that point, I'm so just
You're
like,
out.
make this end. Like, it is that bit where you get, again, it's about like 13 minutes between two tracks. That's pure instrumental and like kind of samples, and it's just madness. And I'm like, okay, cool, let it end.
Yeah, fucking,
It is,
Bernard Herrmann
like,
screeching strings and shit,
Yeah.
kind of around some of these songs. Like, I mean, whether you enjoy it or not, you can look at this and go, Tower of Glory, City of Shame. That's nuts, right?
Yeah.
Like
Like-
what other song could we review this year that sounds like that?
Again, Tower of Glory. Again, I think that's actually quite cool. It's creepy. You get those kind of like droning chants and like
Yeah, it's
spooky
got that kind of
guitar
creepy
lines.
vintage B-movie start to
Yeah.
it. The screen curtains are opening and kind of preparing you to
Yeah, like,
meet some
again,
horror behind them.
I mean, like that and Mercurius Gilded is like the point where I'm like, I could almost find myself like being intrigued by this. So like that it like so there is definite like stuff like again I think is quite cool, and I think if I go back to Alphaville I'll probably find a little bit more I can latch onto. But,
Yeah.
it is basically after Mercurius Gilded where this album just I just have enough at that point when
I mean,
just-
I'm
it
impressed
gets
you got
too
that far.
ponderous and point and like
No, I don't agree in terms of ponderous. I think that it's constantly on the move. Like these songs go on such weird trajectories, and there are parts,
I think it's like definitely higher where it just like goes on. Even though that's one of the shortest tracks, that feels like the least developing over that time.
I mean, there are parts where when Maximalist Scream starts bass swinging, or there's a really kind of groovy thrash riff at the end of Chump Change, and it's been so bizarre up to that point. But you get these like, oh, I can rock to this one. Kind of like I am compelled to move by this music, all things considered. And these songs are, it's a Clockwork Orange, eyes held open, taking these weird trajectories they go on, and I think they are less like super focused individual compositions and songs than were on Alphaville. It feels a bit more freeform, like the way Rotted Futures or Excelsior or Atomic Age, they kind of progress with for this kind of music a real artistic discipline in kind of service of the wider goal, and they all felt incredibly plugged into the overall world building of the album. When, like I said at the start, the kind of Art Deco, New York. There's literally parts of that record where it's like, now I'm on the subway or whatever.
Yeah.
This one is piling on and on with gleeful abandon the weirdest elements. Like when fucking Bezumnaya is like this purely like just industrialized meat grinding like ambient noise track, and with this fucking I think German like desperate spoken word part as it descends into chaos. Like the world building isn't quite so in tune from track to track. The closest I've gotten is kind of with the old like orchestra samples and that kind of like kind of filmic choirs and stuff. I occasionally feel like I'm watching like an old 1930s Universal horror film like The Mummy or something, but like from behind the covers with this exaggerated like child's eye view terror to it. But if this album isn't as definitive, I admire the fuck out of how just restless this is, like creatively. Like it's a band, you get the feeling that Alphaville and Vile Luxury before that, they weren't enough. We have to keep going further. We have to keep pushing this.
Yeah, no. And again, like I do agree. I do admire that strain of what Imperial Triumphant do. Even again, if I don't like it, I can admire the push to be the most extreme and uncompromising band. Like fair play, because again, like everyone can talk about like everything's been done at this point. It's like, well, I mean, have you listened to Imperial Triumphant?
Yeah,
and
I do think
they're a
it's
band finding new things. Like,
yeah, and I do think it's
them.
more than just like being the most extreme band or whatever, because I think there is such a, even like though I said like the world building on this isn't quite what Alphaville was. It's such
there is craft.
It's such a coherent identity to it. Again, the jazz and everything, the kind of the time and place that it seems to be drawing on. Like it's an atmosphere and a vibe that is literally no one else's. And again, we are covering a lot of dense, complicated, forward-thinking records this episode, but this is the most genuinely progressive thing that we're doing. It's not Porcupine Tree. It's not Greg Puciato. This is fucking cutting edge, teetering on the edge of a cliff. It's so fucking on the edge, And I just think whether, again, it won't be for everyone because they're out on a limb, but checking in with them every couple years, making some fucking nutso concoction that not another band on the planet can provide, makes for one of the most fascinating artists that you can follow in the world right now, I think.
Yeah, fascinating. I agree with. There are parts of this where I do just think like, it's just a little bit bollocks, but that like that's just me and my taste, and like when they're going so far on certain things where I'm just like, okay, come on now, wind it in. But again, I'm a pleb who likes simple things like a chorus.
Yeah, I think they're mental. And I love
No, they are lunatics, and again, good for them. Like fully, like you do you, Imperial Triumphant, because no one else is doing it, and like individuality in that way should be applauded. I'm like, cool. I just don't want to listen to it album again.
You got through it, you know. That was a threatening review.
I tried to be positive. Like,
it was a threatening review on the schedule for you for a few months there. Let's see if we can get him on the show at any point. That would be good. Imperial Triumphant, Spirit of Ecstasy.